Starting recording. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Right, today I am here with Mike Buchanan, who I met last week, I think it was. He was wearing the shirt that he's wearing now, and I immediately had to run up to him and say, yes, it's good to see
Nick,
you.
so this is what a men's rights activist looks like.
So weren't wearing that shirt, actually.
The first day of the Battle of Ideas, Elizabeth and I were wearing, this is what an anti-feminist looks like.
That's true. It was the other, yes, I got that mixed up. But both shirts are obviously great and up my alley. And I feel like I'm in the company of good people if I spot something like that. So as I've already said to you, on our channel, on my channel, we're already very much unplugged from feminism as a concept. We know that it is not good news. So with that in mind, do you want to tell us about what you do, bearing in mind that you're not necessarily talking to novices at this? Okay. We're all very interested in this. So go right ahead.
Okay, well, perhaps we can start with the assumption that the audience knows that feminism is not today and never has been, with very rare exceptions, the pursuit of gender equality, but the pursuit of ever more female privileging. So, if we can work, if we can start with that assumption, I belong, I guess, to the men's rights movement. I'm very proud to call myself a men's rights activist. I started in this. If you want me just to sort of say how I kind of got into this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 10 years ago, almost to the month, David Cameron, who was then the Conservative Party leader in opposition, announced that he was going to, or he wished to introduce all women shortlists for prospective parliamentary candidates. Now, he'd kind of shown signs of being a feminist right from the beginning, I think from 2005 when he was elected leader. And I should say perhaps that I worked for the Conservative Party as a consultant from 2006 to 8. So this was a year after I left. Cameron was hated by the party members almost as much as vice versa.
Sorry. Dog making noise. Right.
That's okay. No problem. That day, as did Hugh, I understand a lot of Conservative Party members, and it got me interested for the first time really in feminism, and within weeks actually, I decided that feminism was patently so evil that I'd take early retirement at the age of 51 or 52 and devote the rest of my life to fighting feminism. And in 10 years, I haven't regretted that decision for a single second.
Excellent.
So I think in 2010, I published my first book, because I don't know if anyone can see that, David and Goliath.
Oh, that's great.
So that's obviously Harriet Harman as a sort of 500-pound feminist in dungarees, with David Cameron as Goliath, as David. So I started a thing called the Anti-Feminism League, but it was, I guess, just one of a million websites that were kind of there was a link between increasing the number of women on boards and financial performance. But correlation is not causation. And it rapidly became clear that the causal link was such that when the proportion of women on corporate boards are increased, performance declines. And the only way you can establish that is through longitudinal studies. And we have 6 of them on the Campaign for Merit in Business website. All of them show very clearly this causal link between increasing the proportion of women on boards and financial decline. But I couldn't get anyone interested in it, not politicians, not business people, and that remains the case to this day. So this nonsensical direction of travel carries on. But after about 12 months of doing that in 2013, I was so pissed off, the lack of people's engagement with the facts about this, that I thought, well, I might as well sort of go the whole hog and establish a political party.
Mm.
So in the spring of 2013, I launched Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them. The media always leave the subtitle out.
Of course they do, but it's such an important part of it.
Yeah, well, in fact, in the next year, 2014, the year before the general election, we put out a manifesto, a snappy little 80-page manifesto, which explored 20 areas where the human rights of men and boys are assaulted by the state's actions and inactions, almost invariably to privileged women.
Yes, I mean, I definitely wanted to cover this list of 20 because in my research around who you are and what you do, I found this list fascinating because, I mean, I agree with every point on it, but I know more or less about each one of them. Some of them we're all kind of, we in this circle anyway, are certainly all aware of male suicide rates and the lack of provisions for veterans. But I found it really interesting that you had abortion as the first one. So expand on that and then maybe go through the rest of the list.
Yeah, I wish I had notice of that question because I can never think of all 20. So it started off with abortion and then ended with retirement age.
Oh, I see. It's done like that.
But abortions, I don't really want to go into details, but at the moment, there have been since the 1967 Abortion Act over 10 million abortions, over 10 million unborn children killed. And I say that without any embarrassment whatsoever.
No, me neither. I'm on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bloody Holocaust, is what it is, and that's just the UK, 10 million, and every year another 200,000. But politics is the art of the possible. So our policy position kind of centered around reducing the maximum termination age from 24 weeks to 13 weeks. Because at 24 weeks, you could technically have a situation in the hospital today where in one operating theatre, a medical team is trying to save a 24-week-old, 24-week-old.
No, 24-week-old. You got it. Yeah.
Fetus, and often succeeding. Whereas in the next operating theatre, another medical team is dismembering
another life.
You don't want to go. And the whole my body, my choice is just an obscene thing. The idea that half of humanity has no right to voice an opinion on the killing of unborn children is beyond obscene. It's just
disgusting. I agree with you.
And it's the ultimate power grab by feminists. And men have just absolutely, as a class, men have absolutely waved the white flag on
they
abortion.
Have on this one. I find it particularly disgusting. The no uterus, no opinion line, because now in my position, I can now I can't in good faith date someone who's pro-choice. Because what if I end up in that situation where she wants to get rid of it? I can't live with that, and I don't get a say because I don't have a uterus. That seems like twisted logic to me.
No, it's obscene. I was in Chicago a month or two ago for the 5th International Conference on Men's Issues, and I raised abortion in that talk. And I fully expected a number of people, both men and women, to walk out. And to my great surprise, there was applause. It was only a small part of my speech. And but I mean, the more I think about abortion, the more it's obvious to me that abortion is a men's issue. It's also a woman's issue, of course, but it's also a men's issue. And I think we need to be we need to stand up. And ask people to kind of listen or take some notice of their moral compasses.
Yes, exactly. And I've done a video on this that I don't think I've actually sent you, but it was an MP in Northern Ireland on the phone with Ian Dale from LBC. Ian Dale taking the moral high ground of get into the 21st century, one day you'll catch up with us and kill babies. And this MP was completely staunch, and I was just like, that's the first MP who's actually in Parliament that I've heard defending something from a moral basis ever. I'm not sure I've ever heard that before. So I've got great love for Northern Ireland in that respect. But do you want to go through some of the rest of the of the 20? Yeah.
Yes, I'll I know we don't have too long, but yes, the second issue, alcohol. Women drinking alcohol is the number one cause of mental incapacitation of children across the Western world. But it's poisoning, quite frankly. They can get. It's not just alcohol. I mean, alcohol is the biggest one, but then there's of course smoking. But it's just an example of where women are not held responsible for their actions in just so many areas.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a friend who's done this, who wouldn't stand up to his missus, and I was just so heartbroken that that's the world we live in.
So sorry, you've gone dead there, Nick.
Oh, sorry. I'll shut up and let you continue because I've got a bad connection, so it might stutter. So okay, just carry on, and I'll.
So that's an example of where women can cause grievous bodily harm on an unborn child, and they cannot be prosecuted for it. It's absolute. It's obscene. But it's probably worth going on to women's accountability more generally. There's an absolutely outstanding blogger called, and to my mind, it's the best blog on gender issues in the world, but bar none. It's called The Illustrated Empathy Gap. It has lots to say on lots of areas. It's 700 pages long. The references section is 64 pages long, so it's an incredibly deeply researched book. There's nobody quite like him. But he talks about the criminal justice system at some length, and something like 80,000 of the 84,000 prisoners in British prisons are men. But when you actually look at the stats, if men were sentenced with the same leniency as women, 5 out of 6 men in British prisons today would not be there.
Wow, that is huge.
And it's absolutely bomb-proof. This is case. And so what is the government doing? It's closing women's prisons and building more men's prisons. And I mean, it's just like one of, I mean, all these 20, not all of them, but most of these 20 areas, feminist society is gynocentric. It's concerned for women and girls and couldn't give a damn about men and boys. But feminists just kind of like turbocharge that wherever they go. So
I mean, one thing I find very funny about them is you say that you started on this journey of realizing how toxic feminism was a very long time ago. But me, there were people my age, this is about 4 or 5 years ago, who were discovering feminism as if it was this bold new thing, and it hadn't been going on for 40 years by this point. It was supposed to be this new and shiny, we're going to change the world, and this is the first time we're doing it. And you're saying it had already wreaked absolute havoc way before these people had even discovered it.
Indeed, no. I mean, I'm no expert on the history of feminism. I mean, someone who knows a lot more than I do and has spoken about it is Elizabeth Hobson, who's a 31-year-old at Cambridge University with me, but that's another story altogether. But I mean, feminism has very, very deep roots. Certainly, and I think the first use of the word feminismo or whatever it was there. But then there was I think it was the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention in the United States, which is it was his name was Ernest Belford, and he wrote The Fraud of Feminism in 1913. And while some of the language might seem arcane to us today, he absolutely nailed so much about what the problem of feminism was. And he was actually writing as far back as I think the late 1880s.
That's ridiculous.
I know. So you're quite right. People think that this is all new stuff. And I mean, well, this will often, when we sort of argue with them at Speaker's Corner and other places, they'll always try and talk about, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or so on. And we have arguments, but in the Victorian era, a man and a woman was a legal entity for which the man took responsibility. So if in the Victorian era a woman incurred a debt she couldn't pay, and her husband couldn't pay, the husband went. Now that's a funny form of.
It is a bit. I mean, I think on this channel we all know this about the vote, that women originally didn't want it because, well, first of all, it involved conscription, didn't it? And there was all sorts of other stuff wrapped up in it. So initially they didn't even want it.
I don't think anywhere in the world has female emancipation been tied in with conscription. It's only people of penis who have to be shot and killed and all the rest of it. But I mean, but huge numbers of men died in the centuries, leading up to all adult men having the vote. Women got the vote 10 years. To the best of my knowledge, not a single woman died in the struggle for female emancipation. Not even Emily Davidson, who is presented by feminists as a martyr because she died when she tried to put a sash on the king's horse at I think it was Epsom.
Yeah, it's the classic story. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, but this is a woman who was so out of touch with reality that she attacked an elderly clergyman on a train platform, thinking he was a Chancellor of the Exchequer. So the jockey was very traumatized, obviously, by the event, and committed suicide many years later. There's a very good book I can recommend to people, The Woman Racket by Steve Moxon. I think it was published in 2008, but it was one of 2 or 3 books which absolutely opened my eyes to the reality about the genders. I mean, can we perhaps talk about domestic violence, Nick?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, very briefly, I want to cover the fact that so you've been in this game for a while, and it just always goes one way. There's no consideration ever given to men. There's a classic clip of Jess Phillips that anyone who hangs out on the internet knows about, of her basically laughing at the issue of male suicide rates because she doesn't have 50% representation of women in Parliament. I think. Yeah.
It was a bit more nuanced than that. I think it was 2015, Nick, when Philip Davis, the Conservative MP for Shipley, and the only elected politician, to my knowledge, in the English-speaking world who ever talks on men's and boys' issues, in 2015, I think, he applied to host the first ever International Men's Day debate in the House of Commons. There had been one on International Women's Day for a great many years. And so he basically sort of, I mean, we have it on our website, as you can imagine, in our YouTube channel. But he basically sort of sat in front of the business committee, which decides what gets debated and so on. And at this point, I think Jess Phillips had been an MP for 4 or 5 months, but she was on the committee of 11 or 12 MPs. She was the only female MP, and she basically said, you can have this debate. And it was well known to the committee that the prime interest of the debate was in the male suicide, or suicide, which is the #1 cause of death of men under 45 in the UK and has been for some years. So you're right, the broad point you made. So she said, you can have your debate when I'm happy with the gender balance in the Houses of Parliament. The arrogance behind that is, I mean, yeah, but not one of the other committee members said a word. They all stared at their papers, But there was such an uproar about what she'd done that it was eventually allowed. And there's been one ever since. I think the first year the Minister for Women and Equalities attended, but hasn't attended the last four. So yeah.
Women and equalities. I mean, that tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? Women and equalities, just the structure of that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two genders. Well, are we allowed to say that anymore?
It does tell you. It tells you everything. And I mean, I know some people. Swain O'Pie is one of them, who is campaigning for a minister for men. But there really cannot be a minister for men, because that would absolutely shine a light on the fact there's a problem. And while the general public doesn't get the extent of this this ghastly disadvantaging of men, then why would they allow such a thing? I go back to the point that Philip Davis is the only MP in the world who ever talks for men and boys. But if we can come on to domestic violence.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a bit, I mean, probably the two biggest areas, I guess, for men's rights activists are fatherless, denial of access to children, and domestic violence. Although our number one campaign has been around non-therapeutic male circumcision or male genital mutilation. Perhaps we can come to that later.
We can talk about that in a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of domestic violence, it's one of the areas where the corruption by feminists of government institutions has been very well recorded. It's been known for decades that the feminist narrative that the overwhelming majority of victims of domestic violence are women, and the overwhelming majority of perpetrators of domestic violence are men, is a lie. It's an absolute lie. And there's probably two well-known collections of studies. One was put together by Professor Martin Fiebert at the University of California, and the other one is the Partner Abuse State of Knowledge Project, or PASK. But both looked at hundreds of studies, and both concluded that that women are at least as violent towards opposite-sex partners as men. And in fact, the most violent cohort of couples are lesbians.
Yes. So it's a huge whopping figure.
Exactly how the patriarchy forces lesbians to beat the shit out of each other, I've never quite understood. But it's one of many puzzles.
hey, it's figuring out a way.
But in very broad terms, in 70% of straight couples where there's violence, there's some reciprocity. So each partner will at times provoke violence or start violence, and but in the 30% where it's one way, more than 2/3 of those, so more than 20% of the total, if you like, the woman is the sole perpetrator, and only in 10% of couples affected by violence is the man the sole perpetrator. And there's very good reasons. I mean, men are socialized to just take it. You mustn't hit a woman or a girl. Perfectly okie dokie to hit a man or a boy, of course. But there's also more practical considerations. Men will not leave the home very often because, for two reasons. The children will then cop the full force of the woman's violence, but they will also find no support. I mean, if a man is being battered and goes to his local council, he will be told that if he leaves the marital home, it may not be a marital home, but you know what I mean. If he leaves the home, he will be considered to be voluntarily homeless. Worst case scenario, he'll then be straight onto the street homeless. 90% of street homeless are men, of course. And street homelessness reduces life expectancy by 30 years on average.
Sorry, I've got things going on in this house.
And there's virtually no provision for refuge places for men. And I don't think there's a
Yeah.
single refuge place in the country for men with children. I mean,
Wow. There's
it's,
nowhere
it's,
that a man can flee with their
it's, something,
children.
it's something like there are thousands of places for um, for um, for women and their children, and there's like a handful. I mean, maybe 20 or 30 across the country, I believe, and some of those are not even limited to men, and some of them are for either men or women. And you can imagine how that cookie crumbles.
Yeah. What I'm confused about is how society gets to a point where we've just got a completely false narrative, because there's no reason why, as a society, we should believe that men are more likely to do this than women. And yet we do. And as you say, there's this whopping great issue that there's absolutely no provision for. And why is the question? Why have they been
Well,
allowed to get to
why?
this point? Why is the narrative work this way?
Yeah, well, I think you need to think. Well, it's the money, isn't it? The government departments are perfectly open about having representatives from Women's Aid and Refuge, for example, providing advice. But they feminists invariably believe in the Duluth model of domestic violence. I think it's called the control wheel or something, and that's basically that model says that all perpetrators are men and all victims are women, and it is absolutely as black and white as that. Even when women are violent, it's always a response to men. So women have no moral agency, basically. But the only moral agency that exists is with men, and you see it in sentencing all the time. But there's a huge amount of money. I mean, you must have heard. Well, hopefully you've heard of Erin Pitsey. She opened.
I'm not sure. Go for it.
Okay. Well, she's a legend really in the domestic violence field in the men's rights movement. In
Mm.
1970, almost 1972, she opened the first refuge for women and children in Chiswick in London, and it struck her very very quickly, within weeks, that most of the women themselves were violent. So
Oh.
sometimes they initiated violence, sometimes they responded, but the idea that domestic violence is a male on female thing exclusively was just ridiculous. Now that's coming on for 50 years ago, Nick. And I mean. We've now had decades of studies showing that women are at least as violent towards men as vice versa. But the relentless narrative in the mainstream media is of the feminist lies, and
Mm.
I've never in my born days, if you take the BBC, I mean the BBC is obviously particularly bad, but
Yeah.
but 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 across the media, whenever let's say there's an article on domestic violence, you can almost guarantee there'll be a stock photograph of a woman carrying the corner and a man with his fists, or
Mm.
maybe a stick or something. And it's just, the average person out there does actually believe that the vast majority of victims are women and the vast majority of perpetrators are men. Um, because, I mean, certainly the understanding about men's issues. The mainstream media is still, is still absolutely beholden to feminists for its narratives and contributions.
Mm.
And
Um.
go back to the point that
Yeah.
that politics has been absolutely corrupted. Whenever there's a committee set up on things like domestic violence, you can be very sure that it'll consist of something like nine female feminists, and one male feminist.
Yeah.
So
Very
not
balanced.
it is genuinely bad. I mean, there was a thing called the Family Justice Panel started recently, and that was, I think, nine feminist women, and a High Court judge who's a feminist, who boasts of taking advice from Women's Aid, from feminists. But all this, I mean, there was an extraordinary poll for Society. There's a god awful feminist charity in London, going back to the middle of the 19th century, and in 2016 they revealed the results of a poll which had been taken in the previous few months. And that showed that only 9% of British women identify as feminists, and only 4% of British men. So on average, that's like 1 in 7. So that's an average of 1 in 14 people. That what that is has corrupted, I think, every single. It's corrupted both government, the public sector, the private sector, even the military, for God's sake.
It appears to be everywhere.
But this, so 13, so that is the incredible thing, that an ideology espoused by 1 in 14 British people is basically, it's calling the shots everywhere.
And yeah, I mean, the most concerning, or the ones that where I can sort of lay it out for normies, is a really blatant. Oh, sorry, am I coming through?
Yes, okay, now.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, it is the emergency services, so the police and the fire service. Now, if they're pushing for this desperate 50-50 gender balance, and we need a more diverse emergency services, they're just losing out. They're losing out on upper body strength, is all I was going to say. You need strong people, and if it's pushed into every industry.
Yeah, sorry, I only caught a bit of that, but I think you're talking about how let's say, no, there's a real problem in the force, in the police force and the fire brigade and so on, with women who just can't cut it. And there's no doubt that same in the army, they basically reduce the bar of on physical strength and fitness and so on. And of course. I mean, what's going to happen, in a theatre of war is that the women on the so-called front line, if they're ever put there, they will not be carrying the same as the men. So the men are going to be carrying not only what they've always carried, but also part of the packs for these bloody women. It's just appalling. And of course, they'll all be earning the same. It's kind of like there's more and more women in the prison service, but whenever you see a documentary where prisoners kick off, the male prison officers sort of run towards it, and the women do this sort of kind of vertical jogging, to make sure that they don't arrive at the fight first, and then women come in and give them a good, give them a little kick as if they've contributed anything other than malice. It's not, I'm not saying it's always the case, Nick, but it's like a drugs raid. You see, a line of 10 police officers, bashing down a door and going in. Where are the women? They're right at the bloody.
Yes, they may be there, but they're not fully there.
Same money for less effort and risk every bloody time. I mean, Serena Williams played same prize money.
Yeah.
I just got a message that the connection was lost, but hopefully we'll be okay.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be okay. I'll move on to MGM, because frankly you're up against a whole nother set of people with that one. You're not just against the feminists, you're against let's just say huge swathes of the world, I would say. But I think that your position is very justified. If you want to lay it out, tell us about how you feel about that as an issue.
I'm happy to, Nick. If we could also, though, cover something I'm very keen to discuss in this is, and if we overrun a bit, we overrun a bit. Very much like to discuss fatherlessness and children's access to fathers. But yes, okay. So non-therapeutic male circumcision, or male genital mutilation, as we call it, has been our number one campaigning issue for the last 4 years or so. And it's actually a real horror show. The more you understand about MGM, the more angry you get at how it can continue. And the compared to our other areas, feminists' role in this is not huge. But I mean, just I'll give you just the distilled version. um, I'll call it MGM, is undoubtedly a crime in the UK. It has been since at least 1861 with the Offences Against the Person Act, because it's inflicting actual bodily harm and probably, almost certainly, grievous bodily harm. And it was probably illegal under common law before that. But interestingly, there's no doubt that FGM was equally illegal under that law of 1861 as MGM. But the feminists lobbied and got the passing of I think it's the 1985 Female Circumcision Act, which has been subsequently amended. And feminists sometimes say that they're fighting for men too, to smash the patriarchy, which always brings a hollow laugh to any MRA. But I'm not aware of the last 60 years of a prominent feminist coming out against MGM. And I suspect, quite frankly, that anything that harms men, they think is okie dokie. It's a good thing, especially harming men's genitals. I mean, it's just like a feminist dream, really, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when they're only a few days old. Yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
Indeed. So, but it is a very, very thorny area because of religion. I mean, I guess everyone knows about Jews circumcising their boys at 8 days, but what a lot of people don't know, I find, is that Muslims carry out MGM at the same kind of rates, but not on. I mean, sometimes very young babies, but it tends to be in this country sort of 8, 9, 10, that kind of age. But it does vary. Okay. I've met Muslims at Speaker's Corner who've been circumcised at all ages, but it's always pre-pubescence, of course. It's always because otherwise males would discover just what they've lost, and what they've lost is the foreskin, which contains 90% of the nerve cells, the Meissner's corpuscles, which give men pleasure during sex. Films or presentations on MGM, and I think there's a popular conception that it's a minor thing, and it's very rarely very damaging. But the truth is, Nick, it's always very damaging. There are 16 known functions of the foreskin. The idea is a little flap of skin. It just betrays ignorance. And it's actually, and feminists, in fact, the general public believe because of things like the BBC, the media, that FGM is the removal of the clitoris, full stop. It's absolute nonsense. I mean, even if you look at the Wikipedia page on FGM, you'll find that there's four broad classes of FGM. If you remove the clitoris of a child, you'd probably kill her, because most of it is deeply embedded, and the tip of the clitoris can still orgasm because of most of the clitoris is still in the body. But that's it's not. I mean, I can say that in this discussion, but it's not something that I'd normally say, because you lose people when you say to people that all MGM is more damaging. Most FGM, which is biologically true, you kind of lose people. You lose people. The skin that's removed in MGM in an adult male would be about the size of a £5 note. And I go back to the point that 90% of the nerve cells in the penis that give men pleasure during sex are there. And we have a playlist on MGM on our YouTube channel, I think, with about 150 pieces. 150 videos and audio pieces, and it includes interviews with men who've had MGM as adults for whatever reason, and they certainly attest to the impact on the sensitivity, and there's no doubt there's an increased incidence of erectile dysfunction and so on. How could there not be? But men are shamed into silence. It's an appalling thing, and it's certainly there have been many recorded suicides among men who've when they find out what's been done to them. So it's not just religion. Nick. But in fact, I mean, just staying on religion for a moment, we have on our website and we have on our placards at Speakers Corner, where we go every 2 weeks, links to the Jewish and Muslim cases against MGM. So,
oh wow.
So written by Muslims and Jews. So we always say, look, I'm not going to argue with a Jew or a Muslim on the religious grounds. I say, look, just read. But because you can argue that it's psychologically healthy to not be traumatized by what's been done to you.
Mm.
And to even think it's a great thing. In America, 70 or 80% of men are circumcised to this day as babies, often newborn babies, and they think it's so wonderful that they want it done to their sons. So about, I think, 18 months ago, we had the film American Circumcision released. It's now available to watch for free on Netflix and Amazon, and it's an amazing film.
Oh, wow.
So I've probably said enough about MGM.
Well, I mean, one thing that you're doing that you seem to be doing front and center is changing the language, which I've always thought is a very important tactic. The fact that you're just saying MGM, and we haven't even used the word that it's
I'm
normally.
sorry that you've broken up again.
Oh well. Let's move on to fatherlessness then.
I think it's about, and if I'm just saying one thing on that, Nick, I only went to the Battle of Ideas for the first time last year.
Mm.
I can't believe I hadn't been before. I was just knocked out by the entire bloody thing. There wasn't enough anti-feminism for me, obviously, but so I was very pleased when I turned up to this one, and the first person I saw was someone with the Battle of Ideas T-shirt, clearly a volunteer, yourself, and reacting very very warmly to my "this is what an anti-feminist T-shirt looks like." I thought, my God, this is an interesting start to the 2 days. But last year, both Elizabeth and I found that people were pretty cool to our T-shirts, and a whole load of feminists glared at us, which obviously pleased us no end. But I mean, not many people came up to us and said, "Well done." We think you're on to a good thing here with anti-feminism. But this year, both she and I, when we wore them, we had people coming up to us, not just in a sort of quiet corner, but right in the middle of open areas, saying thank you. I'd like to shake your hand. I think this is fantastic. And it was mainly younger people, I think in their 20s and 30s, and probably half of them were young women.
Mm.
Of proportionately the fastest growing group of people who are coming out as and especially younger women, and it's an absolutely wonderful thing to see. I mean, some of the best known anti-feminists and men's rights activists in the world are women. So I'm thinking of Canadians, for example, including Karen Strawn, Girl Writes What, an absolute legend of the movement. Professor Janice Fiamengo, just extraordinary.
Yes.
Really good track record. Alison Tiemann, and in the UK, a number, including Elizabeth Hobson, our Director of Communications, I mentioned, Natty, who apprehended the woman who threw. So there's more and more women who are coming out as anti-feminists, and we have on the 17th of May. So that's only, gosh, that's next Sunday, isn't it? So that's a week away.
Yeah.
In London, we have the Messages for Men conference, and there's in London, and there's going to be quite a number of women, quite a number of female anti-feminists and non-feminists speaking at that. So it is culturally, at least, Nick. There's no doubt that the culture is turning against feminism, and we had recently somebody I was delighted to see at the Battle of Ideas, and I know you were in the audience for it too. Was Douglas Murray.
Yep.
Who is really heading in our direction pretty fast, I think. And there's a very good chapter titled "Women." It couldn't be titled "Men and Women," could it? But there's a chapter titled "Women" in his book, "The Madness of Crowds." And I think we'll see more and more top-flight international best-selling authors speaking truth about feminism and gender issues. And my God, it's been a long time coming.
Yes. I mean, I think that one thing that we're noticing um, is that, as you say, it's a very small percentage of women are feminists. It's less than 10%, yet they inhabit all the top positions. So there's more than
Well,
90% of us crying out against this.
yeah, they either occupy them, Nick, or they influence very strongly the men, you
Hmm.
know, and who do. Yeah, there's. It seems that there's no door too crazy for them to bash at without men
No.
sort of saying, oh, opening it.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
this is what people said about Gamergate, if you followed that when it happened,
Yes.
or afterwards, is that was supposed to be the final bastion for nerdy men who, they just wanted to play video games, and in the feminists even came for that, and they said, no, no more. You can't encroach on this. This is the last thing we have.
There's something about men gathering which just absolutely torments them, isn't it? So
Mm,
the girl guides don't accept boys, but of course the scouts accept girls, and it's true
yeah.
everywhere. The women always want to corrupt male spaces.
Okay, we're back in. We've had a little pee break, and yeah,
Uh,
let's go straight back in and talk about fatherlessness,
okay,
because that's huge, massive.
yeah, it's probably probably the number one issue that causes suffering among men and children. And for decades, a woman need only make up an accusation of domestic violence or domestic abuse, I should say, which is it's so broad it's virtually meaningless. And she'll get legal aid, and of course she'll be told by a lawyer, by Kafkas and malicious feminists that she should say she was fearful of her husband and all this kind of stuff. And she'll get legal aid. He won't. The law will shortly be changed with the passing of the latest domestic abuse bill, so that many of, well, probably the majority of whom cannot afford legal counsel and they won't get legal aid, cannot cross-examine their ex-partners in court. So it's an outrageous denial of natural justice.
Mm.
And of course, feminists present men cross-examining their ex-partners as being abusing them again. Quite regardless of the fact that there's no evidence that there's any damn abuse in the first place. The default is always that a woman is telling the truth, and the flip side of that coin, of course, is that a man is always guilty on her word. And of course, we
Exactly.
had all that stuff about. I mean, there's probably thousands of men in British prisons today as a result of false rape allegations.
Mm.
Thousands.
Yeah.
But again, we haven't really got time for that today. But to stay on sort of fatherlessness to either parent, including, it's just the most outrageous child abuse, and it's also a major driver of male suicide. I mean, we would not be surprised if mothers being denied access to their children after family breakdowns, were jumping off tall buildings, would we?
No.
We understand, but somehow men are just supposed to suck it up and be stoic, and because they are stoic, and but some not unnaturally do end their days because the suffering is just too much, and the impact on their children of fatherlessness. There've been a number of books, I suppose most famously Warren Farrell's The Boy Crisis, which talks about the impact of fatherlessness, and it is just grotesque on every metric. These knife gangs, these gangs, killing one another with knives. Virtually always, these boys and young men are fatherless. Something
Mm.
like 26 last 27 mass shootings in the States were by young men or older men who had no father figure in their lives, including the Las Vegas mass killer, who
Wow.
was in his 50s or something.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that fatherlessness is an awful thing. I mean, the Boy Crisis by Warren Farrell is a very good book, but it's got one gaping hole in it, and that's feminism. He doesn't name the disease that is causing the symptoms.
And that's your diagnosis.
Oh, yes. I think it's the diagnosis of anyone who looks into this. I mean, feminists have always set out to destroy the family unit and to have the family unit purely as mother and children.
Just removing men from the picture entirely.
Remove them, yeah. And politicians, including Harriet Harman, I mean, they use mealy-mouthed words. The gist of it is that they see no role for fathers in families, other of course, than as walking wallets.
See, now what I'm hoping for in the world of politics is that if you have a few politicians like your Jess Phillips and your Joe Swinsons who continually are banging the drum for feminism and giving it an awful name, giving it a truly awful name because they come off very badly, then that should present fertile ground for someone to oppose that. That's what I would have thought anyway. That's what I hope for.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I've said many times, Nick, that the number one asset that the men's rights movement has is the insatiable. There is no end destination for them. There is no amount of privilege or male disadvantage which is enough.
No.
It's interesting you mentioned Joe Swinson. I mean, as an example of well, quite apart from being very anti-democratic, she said many for Brexit, she would oppose it. But in the last few days, whenever she's pictured in front of a bunch of Lib Dem supporters, they are all women, literally all. There might be 20. Every single one of them is a woman. So it's naked identity politics. And 10 years ago, that people would have laughed at that, but now they think, oh my God, it helps them join the dots. I think, Nick.
Yeah, that's true.
But I say there is no end point, so they will just carry on and carry on. You know, men as a class are still far from rebelling, and whether it'll take men having to suffer a lot more, and for that to be reflected in statistics, more with every passing year, I don't know. But I'm very encouraged by, say, going back to Douglas Murray's book. I think that could be a real game changer.
Yeah, well, I think that men are becoming quite resilient because of the absolute hammering because we've been taking it very publicly, at least the past 5 years. I think before that it was more insidious and it worked in legislation and in backroom policies, whereas now it's just you can, like, saying that a boardroom is full of men is an insult. That's derogatory. They're naked with how much they hate men, and that's making men a lot more resilient. I think it's making me a lot more resilient because I think that we're right, and it just makes us hunker down on our arguments and get ready for battle.
Yeah, but I think most men, it's sort of it sort of makes them just very fearful.
That's true.
I'm not aware of a single director of a FTSE 350 company, so that's probably 2,000 people, who has publicly come out against more women on boards.
Yeah,
not one. But most of this, Nick, interestingly enough, if I could plug, not my book, but William Collins' book, the Empathy Gap. 700 pages. It's quite astonishing. It's a real tour de force. Most of the so the title is The Empathy Gap: Male Disadvantages and the Mechanisms of their Neglect. Now, most of those mechanisms, interestingly enough, are not in primary legislation. They're through how the state operates and how the state. I mean, there's no law that you take, let's say, domestic abuse laws. They tend to be fairly gender neutral. Not
Okay.
not always, but the state doesn't give a flying what for male victims. But that's not because of primary legislation. All the institutions that they need to corrupt, so as to maintain this narrative of all or virtual victims being women.
Mm. Hmm. Have you got any more to plug? Have you got any more of your books as well?
Well, if you insist, Nick.
Absolutely, I do.
In 2009, I came out as something which I guess I didn't know the term at the time, MGTOW, men going their own way.
Yeah.
I had recently gone through a divorce with my second wife, and I felt a real need to understand. There was something about marriage that that I just couldn't stand. It just drove me drove me crazy. And I must have read 40 books before. I had no intention of writing a book. I just wanted to understand. And I wrote a book coming out of that experience called "The Marriage Delusion: The Fraud of the Rings." So that was 10 years ago, and I think I stick by my broad analysis in that
Okay.
to this day. To be honest with you. Okay, while I'm in plug zone, I think 2010 or 11, the glass ceiling delusion.
Hmm.
So that was all about women on boards,
Yeah.
and so something I touch on, not a huge length in there, but the main reason that all else being equal, there are not many women at the top of companies, is literally nothing to do with discrimination. It is largely because of work ethic. And Dr. Catherine Hackim in the year 2000, a world-renowned British sociologist, showed that 4 out of 7 British men are work-centered, but only 1 out of 7 British women is.
Mm.
Women want work-life balance.
Yes.
So it was David Cameron, to his eternal shame, who really kicked the ball off to get more women on boards in 2010. He appointed the Labour peer Lord Davis of Abersock to make recommendations on how to increase the proportion of women on boards. Not to investigate whether it'd be a good thing, but to do it. So he introduced threats of gender quotas, and so I think in the year 2010 there were about 10% of FTSE 100 directors were women. It's now I think about 30%.
Okay.
But of those women, that large number of women who've been appointed to boards, something over 95% of those women who've been appointed over those years have been appointed as non-executive directors.
Okay.
I mean, some of them sort of like run charities or they're civil servants, all sorts. These are not really smart, high flying business women. It's just
Yeah.
a con. But anyway, so
It's a way to
and
fudge
I'll
the
finish with my
numbers.
and I'll finish with plugging. And thank you for the opportunity to plug them, by the way. With
That's
with
fine.
with my latest book, um, "Feminism: the Ugly Truth,"
Oh,
and I justify that cover. It's a waxwork of a female vampire somewhere in Eastern Europe, and I justify it because feminism is, well, I mean, it's a female-driven ideology. It's ugly and it's evil, and that picture is it for me. So there we are.
absolutely. Smash the matriarchy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I see the tide turning. I think you can relate it to so many things. Brexit is really this sort of catalyst where it became clear what the establishment is for and what it's against, and it becomes more and more naked with every issue, with every month. And 2019 seems to be the year when people say, you know what, fuck off, we're in the majority, even though you're at the top
Yes.
and you think that you're
And
calling the shot. Yeah.
in a considerable majority, Nick, you're quite right. But of course, I mean, politics is downstream. Oh, sorry, Nick, I was speaking over you there.
No, no, you go on. I'm waiting for you.
Yeah. I mean, some people have queried why we formed a political party 6 years ago. And
Mhm.
and the main reason was, I guess, well, there were a few, but the main one was to get mainstream media exposure, and we've had that.
Yes.
3 days after we launched the party, I was on the Jeremy Vine show, 7.5 million listeners listening to me debate with a woman that we normally refer to as Special Snowflake, um, um, Laura Bloody Bates
I'm not
of
sure I
the
know who that is.
Okay, Laura Bates runs the Everyday Sexism Project,
Okay.
or as we call it, the Everyday Whining Project.
It's a
She, she,
grievance
she,
merchant.
she, oh my God, yeah. And she was the first member of something we started some years ago called the Wine Club,
Yay!
WHINE. And she was our first, I think, whiny feminist of the month. Um,
Fantastic.
she she won she won three of our lying feminist of the month awards, and she may even have won some of our gormless and toxic feminist of the month awards. But there we go. Yeah, but she's
Wonderful.
an example of a woman. Um, I suppose she's in the mid 20s or something, perhaps even 30 by now, who basically gets what she wants by whining. And I imagine that her parents, that she sent her parents scatty with her whining and
Mm.
got whatever she wants. And she's learned that, so she goes through life, and it is just nothing but a wine fest. This bloody old project of it. But she's on the mainstream media all. But to go back to the point that, I mean, culture. There's no doubt that the culture is turning against feminism.
Mhm.
Um, but it's yet to really hit the mainstream media. I mean, I subscribe to the Times, and they have god awful feminists like Caitlin Moran
Yeah.
and a number of others. I can't recall ever reading anything anti-feminist. I mean, not one sentence.
No.
There are a couple of journalists who write for the Times and the Spectator.
Yeah.
Rob Little, and James Delingpole, most obviously, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
there are two sort of bastions of common sense, but
yeah,
the entire rest of the industry appears to be you know, on batting for the other side. But that's the point, is
it's
we're the grassroots one.
yeah, and and it will accelerate, Nick. There's no question about it.
No.
But it'll probably take decades before it's taken 50 years roughly. I mean, if you think of Germaine Greer's the what's it, the eunuch, the female eunuch,
Yeah.
which postulated that men as a class hated women. Pure projection, absolutely pure
Yeah.
projection. But it's taken 50 years for us to get this deep in the shit, and it could take another 50 before we're out of it. I hope not. But certainly, this, male suffering is one thing, but this also leads to a lot of female suffering.
Yes.
Uh, you know, I know some young women in their 30s who can't find beautiful women, wonderful personalities, funny, just everything going for them, who cannot find a partner.
Mm.
Um, One of the reasons, of course, is hypergamy. Women always want to marry someone on the same level or ideally above. And because women
Yes.
have got so many of these middling jobs, there are not the number of men anymore. Um, but so you know the mass march, I guess, of women into managerial jobs and so on, means that the pool of men available to marry them has just shrunk. And
Yeah.
most of these women will not have families, and they're going to end up very bitter cat ladies,
Yeah.
and they can be there being cat ladies on feminism, absolutely fairly and squarely.
Speaking of cat ladies. No, I was going to say about that yeah, it's pitting the two genders against each other in a battle is completely stupid because we're two sides of a coin. And whatever
Yeah,
damage you do to one side, you're actually doing to the other. So when they think they're giving men a kicking, it's only really going to harm them down the line, because we do rely on each other. That's just how nature works. We can't survive if
absolutely,
it's a
Nick.
battle.
Yeah, but I mean, feminists. I mean, going back to the point, only 9% of British women, only 9% of British women are feminists.
Yes.
So there's a huge amount of female collateral damage, but they don't give a stuff for that. They really, it's always about power and nothing about power. Anything that gives women as a class, and particularly feminists as a class, more power is good. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much damage is incurred, to women, and of course children. I mean, feminists don't give a damn about children. I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah. Yeah, but as I can see it, the tide is turning. As I can see it, everyone is fed up, and this thing can't get any bigger. They seem to be splurging their power. You think it can?
Oh, it's going to get, certainly in the real world, Nick. Yes, there's no question that. I mean, while public understanding of feminism and it's on increases in the real world, it's the power of feminists is still growing.
Oh.
And,
well,
and that could go on for and that could go on for a long time yet. You take the still going through or will be that goes further in the feminist direction than any previous legislation in this area.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll have to continue the crusade. I think we've gone over the hour that you said that you would. So, and I know that you've got a lot to do. But I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week. We'll have a great fun day.
Yes,
do you want to quickly plug that in case anyone's in London?
Yeah, so it's in London. I can't recall exactly when it starts. We actually start at 11 o'clock at the Royal Courts of Justice with a march for men, which hopefully you'll be able to join us at that.
I will.
And we march from there to Parliament Square. We have banners, placards, chanting, the whole shooting match, and then there's a mini conference. And I think this is the third mini conference called Messages for Men, and it's basically organised by two leading anti-feminist women, and there's a great lineup of people, and we're hoping that Sargon of Akkad is expected to be among them. So John Waters from Ireland and plenty of people, because people are going to be allowed only 15 minutes to speak. So after that, a shepherd's crook comes out around the neck, and you get pulled off the stage. So some people always do try and bloody go on, but I'm particularly looking forward to your talk, Nick. I enjoy your channel. I think it's going to be a huge channel. It's always great to see younger people coming into the movement.
Well, I mean, we're so fed up of how things work in the mainstream that we've just completely given up on it. I can't see myself ever watching anything from the BBC or probably even Netflix ever again. It's YouTube until YouTube get rid of us, and then we'll have to find somewhere else.
Oh no, I can. I mean, I'm a big fan of Netflix because I'm a big fan of comedy, and they've had some good stuff.
They've had Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle, yes. I've watched a lot of his stuff recently. Bill Burr's piece from the Royal Albert Hall is sensational. It's more anti-feminist than he would have been in the past. So it's all good. It's all good.
It's all good. It's all turning our way. Right. I will let you get on, and I will see you in a week's time, good sir.
Okay. I look forward to that.